I had so much externally to deal with the healthy challenges of what that could have been that I couldn't fulfill on that for a long period of time. The whole reason I do what I do is because I'm trying to be the voice that I wish I had when I was young. But it was freeing in a sense. And I remember I stepped onto the pavement after that therapy appointment, and I just smiled. I looked around, I was like, well done, Dan.
From Ministry of Work, welcome to Greater Manchester's Greatest Minds, the show about Greater Manchester's pioneers, entrepreneurs and visionaries, and the stories that brought their ideas to life. I'm Eddie Whittingham, and on today's show we're joined by Daniel Wilsher, public speaker, youth mentor and serial founder. Daniel's story is one of raw honesty, resilience and reinvention. After losing his dad to suicide at just 9 years old, Daniel spent years battling anxiety, depression and addiction before a single phone call to his mum and a long overdue therapy session set him on a path that would transform his life. Now a TEDx speaker impacting thousands of students, teachers and corporate teams, Daniel shares how his lived experience, vulnerability and storytelling can spark real change. Whether he's delivering mental health talks in schools or launching a nootropic drinks brand, his mission is clear: be the voice he needed when he was young.
So life for me started in Rochdale, of all places. And I always say unfortunately at the end of that. But no, grew up in Rochdale, had quite an interesting upbringing. It's weird, obviously, my journey around kind of like mental health and whatnot. I was saying this to someone the other day around how because of some of the difficulty around some of the experiences I experienced as a young lad, it kind of like tainted my view of growing up. And so, especially when I went through kind of the depression and anxiety later on in life, like I looked back on growing up, or it was easy for me to look back at growing up and thinking like it was all bad, but it wasn't. So I've got into a habit of just trying to start when anyone asks me with the positive stuff. So that's what we're going to do today on that side, which is cool. Wonderful kind of time growing up. Mum was absolutely brilliant. Dad was like kind of like larger than life in terms of who he was, and really, I remember just really positive, really playful times growing up. My mum, we weren't super well off. She was a teacher. Dad used to work in Asda at the time on the bakery section, but I remember like just the most wonderful thing about me growing up and the family unit was probably the way my mum allowed me to just kind of like express who I was at any point in my life. And whether that was through music, she always made sure she paid for the guitar lessons, and even when kind of she was struggling financially as a single parent later on. And so I had this wonderful kind of like childhood where I got to experiment and really find out who I was as a young person. But it was filled with difficulty, a lot of loss early on. I lost 3 grandparents by the age of like 5-6 years old. Mum was a teacher, super career driven. Obviously, I don't think people realise how often and how hard teachers work.
They are.
And then you're working at school in Rochdale, which comes with its own with its own challenges. But she was like superwoman, and kind of in terms of who she was kind of chasing that career ladder. Dad was, basically I ended up divorcing at 5 years old with my mum. That was kind of like the first real challenge that came, and I had these then 2 kind of opposing households where, at my mum's, it was kind of like very together. I saw her work and she would look after us kids in the week, and then at my dad's, I was on kind of an estate in like Kingsway in Rochdale, where it's a little bit crazy. And so I had these 2 very opposing households, but both love and support from both parents even after the divorce. But what I didn't obviously realise at the time was kind of the route that my dad was going down, and that was kind of descending further into chaos, and kind of seen the signs as a young lad where I would go and stay at my dad's because he wasn't staying at his home. He was getting kicked out of his home a little bit, or he had to stay at his friends, and then he got a flat and was not living with his partner at the time, even though they were together. And so we were kind of moving around different places at Paps's, as a young kid, you just think that's normal anyway. I was
going to say, did you think any different at that age? Probably not.
No, exactly that. No, I just had my mum's house, and then I had dad's, and then dad was at a new place and whatever it was. Later in kind of hindsight, you realise, okay, there was some stuff going on. But obviously we ended up basically losing Paps to suicide when I was 9 years old. So he ended up taking his life when I was 9. And, I'll never forget the day. You know, it was a really a profound day. I can walk you through the steps word for word. I don't need to, but it was a really, really profound experience, and a very difficult one for a young 9-year-old to go through. Like I wouldn't kind of wish that on anyone. But that event, you know, that was the start of such a big transition in my own life, and you know, Dad called in the week before to chat to everyone basically, and he spoke to my sister and my mum and my younger sister, and I was angry with him at the time, and so my way of putting a kind of a boundary in place and showing that I was angry was to give the phone back, and so I didn't speak to him, and so you know, a suicide will directly impact 135 people. All of them will feel a level of guilt. You know, did I text enough? Did I call enough? And but for me, the guilt was a lot stronger because of the phone call. Yeah. And so then the belief system that formed as a result of the event was, this is my fault. I need to make it up to my family. I'm now the man of the house. The first time I'd shown anger where it was healthy to do so, I lost someone. So the idea of boundaries then became really tough to navigate, because obviously the first time I'd put a healthy boundary in place, I'd had this very catastrophic event. So then I was like, I internalized everything. If I've got these big emotions, keep it to yourself, Dan, because people can't handle them, especially if they're close to you. And I also kind of saw, you know, Dad getting kicked out of his home, the problems with kind of drinking and whatnot as well, and the instability and the financial difficulty, and being like, okay, well, if I grow up and my life is the same, then I'll do what he's done. Believing suicide was genetic. So that belief system that formed at 9, you know, massively impacted my ability to navigate later life. But one of the key things that came from it was drive and ambition. Because I was like, if I'm successful and I'm wealthy, then I'll be safe and my family will be safe. And so the idea of money was really, really important. And that was amazing in school. And, you know, was head boy, straight A student, 6 A stars, 5 A's, 2 B's. I always say it. I love saying it. And, you know, really, really talented, really capable, but kind of was leaving what I call behavioural breadcrumbs through school, which were kind of subconscious ways of asking for support through.
Like what sort of things?
Music was the biggest sign. So obviously I'd played a lot of instruments, and I was self-taught on piano from a young age. And so my way of kind of dealing with the event in itself first came through music, because obviously I didn't even know what was going on as a young lad.
Yeah, mate, 9 years old.
100%. But the music was a really kind of useful tool for me to express. But in there was always, you know, themes of suicide or whatever. I wrote a song when I was 13 called Realize. And it's always quite funny because the belief system that I learned at 22 through therapy, which I just explained to you before, was written in the first verse of the song Realize that I wrote at 13. I remember it now. It's I've tried just to get away thinking about these better days. Still I wait, still I pray, still I've not seen my life change. I'm hoping that my mother stays well and safe, just in case the man up in the sky decides to take another parent away. Like, that's the first few lines, and it's saying about, you know, feeling like I'm on my own, worried about losing mum the same way, and it goes on to talk about some of the other things. And so the music, you know, was kind of like my way of expressing, but it should have been a great window into what I was kind of internalizing or dealing with as a young lad. But it went unnoticed because I think I was high achieving.
Did no one sort of try and jump in at that point and clearly see that you're asking? Because it's a cry for help at that point, right?
In a sense. So it's weird. It's like, and this is why it's kind of like, it's an interesting one, because that was just me expressing. I'm not going, I'm going to write a piece of music because I don't feel comfortable talking, but I want people to know some way. And if I wrap it up in this nice thing, then maybe that's an easier way to show. I was just going, sweet, this is what I'm going to write. And there we go. And that's my experience of the world. I think no one did. So this was the bit in hindsight that, again, was quite frustrating, and why the stuff in schools is really important for me, because, you know, there were kind of those signs. There were the music. There was the time in performing arts where everything I would do would be related to suicide or losing someone, even when I was doing acting stuff, and it would always be really sad and heavy. And I'm like, this amazing piece of work, and people are crying their eyes out. Do you know what I mean? And so there was obviously those signs as a young lad. You know, I taught myself piano through not locking myself in, but being in the music rooms, lunch and break, and I would work my way around the piano. But there was times where I would come out, I would be kind of like visibly distressed as a young lad, and there was other changes in behaviour, social groups, emotional breakdowns, like reactions, large reactions to things that shouldn't have been an issue, like large emotional reactions. But yeah, because I think I was high achieving, they didn't have the system, the process in the schools. There wasn't the technology, there wasn't the safeguarding software.
And I suppose for like people a little bit further away from immediately with you, do look at you on paper and go, "This guy's doing amazing." Like
100%,
high achiever, despite that clear trauma, actually is doing all right.
Exactly, and that was the thing. Like a lot of the drive and the ambition stemmed from some of the trauma, the divorce, and then obviously losing Paps, because again, that idea of success. And so on the surface, Danny's talking about how he wants to change the world, or Danny's on the football team and athletics team and has an amazing attitude in class, and he's bright and plays a few different instruments, and he's performing arts, and he's getting good grades, and he's socially accepted. So I can understand the complexity of like, why would you think? Maybe it is just Dan Express.
Do you ever feel any, not resentment's a strong word, do you ever feel like someone should have come in and put their arm around you a bit more at that stage?
100%. Yeah, and I look back now, and that song "Realize" I put on Facebook at the time. It got like 1,300 likes back in the day, which is decent. Yeah.
Mega millions that.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And so like it was obvious, and even in that song, I end up in the second verse. I depict a scene of a young lad who's thinking about taking his own life, but worried because he don't want to leave his little sister. That's what I'm writing at 13, 14 years old, and for me that's what's frustrating. And there's an element of of kind of, if I was a teacher or whatever, and this is what I'm saying, like would I've noticed, but I think it's the mental health literacy, isn't it? I think a lot of schools, 50% of teachers didn't feel confident having a conversation about mental health with a kid just 2 years ago. We're talking a long time ago, 10 or whatever the maths is, public speakers, or better, we language, not numbers. But it is quite frustrating. And that's why I do the work that I do now, is because, so from the dual perspective of, okay, let me actually help kind of develop the introspection of young people and help them feel comfortable speaking, and relate and connect through a story that they might be experiencing. Because that was the other thing, I felt like a little alien in school, because I knew nobody, or I felt like nobody would ever know or understand like what I had to deal with, or who I was, or what life was like for me. And I felt really like a little alien. That's how I used to describe it. And so it's a pleasure for me to go in and deliver the story in a way that still has humor in, and is still like full of energy. And I bring them up and I do boxing demonstrations, and I can create this really kind of like fun space around a topic that is naturally and obviously very difficult to speak about usually. And I can give them that those kind of, that understanding of the power of conversation, of ways that you can look after yourself, and actually that you can take some of these difficult experiences and create something beautiful out the other end, and give them some hope if they are in the same position as me, or just inspire them as young people. And so for me, the work around doing that is super important, but then also working with the teachers, doing kind of training and whatnot, helping them understand the journey through education for a kid who's been through trauma. I'm doing the staff wellbeing stuff, all of that, and that kind of approach of, okay, well, if we're helping and support the students in their own development, whether it's talks or vision and value stuff, let's support the teachers. And then the new model is to also support parents, because my belief is the full ecosystem. It's parents, teachers, and students. And so schools, for that very reason, and the whole reason I do what I do, is because like I'm trying to be the voice that I wish I had when I was young, and that's what I always say. And so that's why the work for schools for me is like integral, because of I always think like from the age of 16 to 22, 23 to when I actually got therapy, and then obviously had all this journey, which is like phase part 2 of my life, or whatever it is, or chapter 9 probably, to be honest. I always say from that age of 16 to 22, I barely made it through college. Got into like 4 or 5 years of like drug abuse, severe drug abuse. Had the depression, the anxiety, the suicidal ideation. I had a failed business after uni. I dropped out of university. I had like 11, 12 different places of residence in that time. Financial debt, that came up. So I had all these challenges that you could kind of trace back to the trauma. And for me, I don't want people to have to go through
When you were going through that particularly bad period, did you know you were sort of self-destructing at that point, or were you kind of just, I don't know, did you care at that point?
Yeah, so I did
for a long period, isn't it?
Yeah. So it was like 4 or 5 years, and nothing is working, and everything's going wrong, and I'm handing assignments into Unilay, and I just don't care, and I'm taking the drugs, and I'm, if I've got there was times where, like, if I had to choose between food and going and taking drugs on a weekend, I'm choosing the drugs, as a young lad, and this kind of recklessness inside of me as well, and I was consciously aware of it. I knew that it wasn't great. I knew that I was in this negative perpetuating cycle, but I couldn't do anything to change it at that time. And however, why I stayed in it for so long was because of what you could argue is what is stigma. It was the idea that, like, my strength as a man is going to be determined by my capacity to pull myself out of what I've created for myself. Because again, there was a lot of internalizing on it, but there was also a lack of understanding. I didn't know, and what I'd learned through therapy was where the behaviors came from. And when I understood why I had the behaviors, I had the power to change them then. But in that time period, I'm just getting slaps left hook, uppercut here, like, being thrown all over the gaff, not knowing where they come from, and just having these really strong forces that for me were unmanageable, because I was fighting against the way my brain had developed from a young lad. Do you know what I mean? And that was the piece.
So what was the turning point? Like, you mentioned therapy, but how did you start therapy? Like, what?
Yeah, so I'd had, like, again, my core belief, money's going to fix mental health, which is why when I dropped out of uni, I set up the first business, lost that, went into recruitment,
Actually, yeah.
Yeah. So there was two environments that...
What was the first business, sorry, out of interest?
It was a contracting company.
Right.
So recruitment, Sparky's electricians into construction. I had no idea what I was doing. I worked with a founder who, my friend of mine who was a lot older at the time, and then that just didn't work out, and it was horrendous. He'd worked in the profession before. I hadn't. The idea was that I would set up the business, he'd help train me and whatnot, and then none of that happened, and it was just a nightmare. And ended up having to sign the business over after 6 months because of some difficult circumstances. And then was like, okay, I have no job, no uni degree, no nothing. That was scary. Had director on my CV, helped me get a job. Managed to get into recruitment, gifted a gab, smashed the interview, and that felt like every time I reached these milestones of, like, dropping out of uni, then the business fell back into recruitment. I'm seeing lads in Rolex watches and Mercedes and suits to work, and I'm from Rochdale, and I'm like, I've never seen this.
You're gonna get
exactly
to that, right?
100%. And so I'm like, if I can just hit a big financial month, then everything will be fixed, because I can look after family and I can look after myself, and money's how we fix all of this. That was the core belief, and that worked. And I was like, I was hell-bent on just making a success of it. So I was working like 12, 13-hour days sometimes, just this immense pressure on feeling like this was my last, like this was like life or death. It felt that intense, and and I smashed it for 6-7 months. Broke company records in the first 3-4 months. I sold 6 retainers on one call, 200K's worth of confirmed business if I could fill the roles. I'm flying, no one's done it before, and everyone's bigging me up, saying, Dan, like, you're gonna top newcomer this year. So my ego's inflating, it's getting bigger. By like 7-8 months in, 9 months in, I'd put like 70, 80, 90 grand on the board. And again, like, flying, feeling good, got first bit of commission, spent it all on a night out, as you do. And then ended up basically hitting burnout 8 months in, basically, because I'd stopped all the things that were supporting me in the process. Writing music, going to the gym, I stopped all that, and I was just hell-bent on it. Yeah, exactly. Which I think is fine to do at times, like, even in entrepreneurship, I have to do that now, but what it was like, I had so much externally to deal with the healthy challenges of what that could have been, that I couldn't fulfill on that for a long period of time. And then I ended up hitting burnout, and kind of just couldn't hit my basic targets. Started having nightmares like 3-5 times a week for like 4 or 5 months, and I knew I wasn't great. And my belief, my numbers started to drop, confidence started to drop, and as you'll know from sales, They used to say like smile when you're on the phone because they'll hear it at the other side.
If you're desperate, you're not getting a sale, are you?
But you can feel the energy, you know. And so I couldn't form relationships. I couldn't maintain relationships with candidates or clients. I was forgetting information on calls, which is important when you're in recruitment. The whole thing is around information, isn't it? So you can manage a process properly and effectively. So then I stopped billing. Weren't filling any of the retainer stuff. And was in this very really tough cycle again. And that was probably the hardest point in my journey around the mental illness, because things got really, really challenging, really quite scary. And started having nosebleeds from stress and all this stuff, and I was just spent. And then the suicidal ideation had got really quite strong, and I remember just thinking, like, I've tried everything now. I'm spent.
So that had come back then to the forefront.
It was always there. It was right. Yeah. It was always there.
Even when you were smashing it and doing well.
Yeah. I would still have to deal. Obviously, career going well. My whole value system is based on money, so I'm like, okay, well, I can see the future. So, you know, not my whole value system, but
that's quieter than normal because it's all going to be fixed soon. Yeah.
I'm seeing hope for the future. And then again, when it dropped again, I'm slapped again in the face. I'm like, right, it's the same cycle happened again. And so that was a really challenging time, and I was faced with an option. Then it was like, you know, Dan, in that 5 months, I tried reading self-help books and tried signing up to a marathon, half marathon. And my belief was like, again, it was that typical, like, if I can just convince myself I'm strong, you know, by doing something that no one else can do in this moment now, like, I'll be able to get myself out of this situation. And again, I would just fail with these things. I would tell myself I need to meditate every day and journal every day. And then when I couldn't do that, I was a failure because I can't even do a 10-minute meditation. So, you know, so it was like that really chaotic cycle. And I just called my mum. And I just said, I'm struggling on the phone. I said, Mum, I was like, I'm struggling. And I could feel like a sense of relief from her on the conversation, because I didn't let her parent me, you know, for all that time. I think it was the first time where she'd gone, right, now he's going to let me do something, because I would never have done that prior. And she said, Dan, don't worry, come on, we'll get this fixed. And just had a chat with her the next day. She drove up to Leeds, bless her. And I just spoke to her about, I've had an ip with drugs and mental health problems, and I always say, telling a Polish mum that he'd been taking drugs for 5 years. That was a tough part of the journey. But she was like, no worries, we'll get this fixed. She bells me the next day, you know, Dan, she'd organised a therapy appointment. Can you turn up? And I just broke down on the phone. I'm sorry. Thank you. And she ended up organising the therapy appointment. I ended up turning up and then engaged with it, but I hated the idea of it. But I ended up.
I was about to ask that. What was your perception of therapy beforehand, before you engaged with it?
The idea of medication and the idea of talking to someone about my head. As a 22-year-old lad who wore a Hugo Boss suit to work, I got on staff discount from when I used to work there. You know, that was scary, because I was like, my default was, Dan, just go to the boxing gym more, or just train more, or whatever it is. I was like, you know, it felt like a failure. I remember being sat in the private hospital when I went to a psychologist first, and he calls me and he's asking me all these questions. How's your sleep? What's this? And I remember leaving there going, how have you let yourself get to this point? I remember just internalized, like, how are you here? And, you know, the whole kind of, not facade, but the whole, like, dichotomy between the where I thought I was wearing the Hugo Boss suit and the trajectory that I was so hell-bent on trying to believe for myself because that was safety, even though I was in a completely different space. Like, that gap just fell, and I was in reality, and I was like, yeah, this is it was tough. I always say that was probably one of the hardest moments, because it was like the true realization of just exactly where I was.
It's sort of like taking the makeup off almost, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I couldn't run from it then, and that was the hardest point of acceptance. But, you know, that was the first point of truly being like, cool, this is how I'm going to be on this journey now, you know what I mean? And thank God all of that happened. Thank God I had the mum that I had. Thank God I made the phone call, you know, because then what came after that and what's been after that has been magic. So
let's talk about that. This sounds like it's got...
Yeah. Oh no, 100%. Yeah. Gone straight into the depths, pull back out. But
it's
that's
an important
it.
part of your story, and I can see how, you know, getting to that point of needing the therapy is that huge turning point.
100%.
And then the therapy being a massive positive, not something you did. Did you fight against it? Or
for 4 months, about 4 months. Yeah, and I always say, and in my public speaking talks, all the time, I went in my Hugo Boss suit and I had my tie and my watch on and my pocket square, and I'm like head to toe just looking clean, like overcoat on, all this stuff. I walk into the office, I put my things down nicely, I sit on the therapy seat and my back is straight and I'm turning to him, I'm looking at him like this. And he always used to say, like, in the first few weeks, he was like, Dan, he's like, I'm so confused. I was like, why? He's like, I feel like you're interviewing, you're the one who's interviewing me, because you sit here and you sit really proper in your nice clothes, and you tell me about your dreams and how you're going to buy your mum a house at 26. And he's like, I have people who come here on day one and they'll break down and they'll be crying on that sofa for 40 minutes and I won't get a word out of them. And he's like, you come in here and you present, this thing.
Yeah, super composed.
Exactly. And what I understood was like, that was a big so even then, straight learning was like, God, like, that is my defense mechanism. I didn't realize it, but what I would do would present as being amazing on the outside, because then no one thinks I'm not doing okay. And I'm doing that in the therapy seat as I'm sat opposite a psychologist,
Who sees through it.
Yeah. Stupid.
Like, come on, mate.
Silly boy. Yeah. I'm like, yeah.
I've got a job recruitment anymore. Why are you dressed like that?
You know what I mean? Funny, man. It's so funny.
But you were obviously warm to it though.
Yeah. So
like, over time.
I wouldn't say warm to it. It was his job is to push and to pry and to find and watch how my body will respond naturally. And he would, he knew which areas, because when he asked certain questions, he would see it on me, and but he would spend, that first 30 minutes, I was a master, mate. First 30, 40 minutes, I would dance around, everything that I could possibly do and keep things nice and light and airy. And then he would push and I'd go, no. And I would shut down and I would leave. And he would push a little more the next time, and I would get like visibly, my whole composure would just go out the window. I used to say I would tense my whole upper body like this and squeeze any sadness down, and it would just, it would be a complete switch, and I knew what he was doing. And then he was brilliant though, like genius, because he never pushed too much. He kept me in this really great space where he knew some things that needed to come out, and then one day he didn't stop pushing around this certain moment, and I had to kind of go back into the trauma, and he just kept on pushing. But I was like, I know I need to go through it, and I wanted to leave. I kept myself in the seat, and he got this thing out of me that I thought I wouldn't tell anyone in my own entire life, and I went home and cried for about half an hour. But Ed, listen, like after I didn't go back to work. I was going on my Friday lunch to hide it from everyone in the office. that was the plan. I remember I had 7 minutes to get back from the therapy seat to the office seat. I was like, to compose myself. But I went home this time because I couldn't go back to work, and cried for about half an hour. But afterwards, I felt about 30 kg lighter, and my shoulders just went boom, like came back. Everything changed. I just took this deep breath, and I was like, Dan, like that needed to come out. Like I felt physically lighter, and then I was like, right, so talking must obviously work. I was like, at that point I was like, this feels like that's a very important and right step forward. And I was like, conversation obviously works. And so I went back in the next day. I said, listen, I've got this issue with this over here, I've got a problem here. I said, I want to talk about this. And I always described that point of the shift in mindset was viewing myself as a project, not a problem. All the way up into therapy, up until that point, I was a problem. You're here, Dan, because you're broken. You're a problem. Your life's a mess. You're sat in front of a therapist because you've got issues that you need to fix. When I went back at that time, it was like, for the first time I was like, I'm just a project. And so you think about a project, and it requires, in business, like it requires you to begin where you are with what you have. It requires you to plan and expect things to go wrong and to know that it's going to be difficult. A project, in order to complete, is going to require the support of people in an ecosystem to help deliver on it, and that was it. And I was like, well, where am I at? Well, I've got these things. Cool. What are the good things? Well, I'm at therapy, I'm doing the sweet. How long do I think this is going to take? Well, I know that I'm going to have to go through these. And is it going to be easy, Dan? Probably not. And I'm going to require the support of the people around me and whatever it is, but I could treat myself just as that. And that was the mindset shift. And then I started to really, truly love the exploration of the things that I was learning. A little thing around when I told you about all the gear, like I couldn't go to Tesco without wearing nice clothes. So he set me a little challenge of going to Tesco in like odd socks and like crease top. And then it became such a fun experience, and I loved learning about where things came from in relationship to myself, and actioning it on a week to week basis, and seeing myself just start to feel better and get my smile back and get the gift of the gab back, and that was a wonderful thing for me. And so it was like, it wasn't a warm up, it was like months of tension, months of difficulty, then a snap for me. And I used to define the first 4 months of being a waste, because I was staying at my barber's because I couldn't afford money for rent. I was on 18k base in recruitment, the rest was commission. Obviously I wasn't any commission. It's changed now. But I was staying at my barber's because I couldn't afford money for rent. I had an hour-long bus journey to get to the office for getting in for 7 in the morning. I was getting home at 10 every evening, trying to make stuff work. It just wasn't happening. And it was a really tough and challenging time, where, like, financially as well. And I viewed that 4 months of being a waste. But in hindsight, it was necessary. Like, I needed 4 months of, I'm leaving, I'm not engaging, I'm turning away from you, I'm avoiding your questions, to then get to the point of being like, right, sweet, now let's go. And I think that's something that people don't think about in relationship to therapy and some of this really deep work. And I'm not saying people, everyone's going to have whatever work it is, you're going to be at different points. You might need 6, you might need 12, whatever it is. It depends who you're with as well. But I think what's important for people to understand is that if you're going on that journey, and if you truly are ready to go down that path, knowing it's going to be tough, which is amazing and one of the greatest displays of strength I think anyone can show, understand that it's going to be a period of time where you get used to this new environment and this new space and this new experience of the world and some of the things that are coming up, and it takes time. It takes time to connect with a therapist. It's not like right away you see change. It takes a bit, but if you feel like you've got someone who's good in front of you, if you can see the ways that they're working, if you can see some little positive changes, if the relationship is there, stick with it, because when you can push through those walls of pain and like sit in it, then what comes from the other side is magic. And so,
and was this the big catalyst then for what you do, a large part of what you do now?
100%. One of the biggest ones, because...
how quick from that to like, right, now I know what I need to do?
So, I finished therapy. Finished my medication. I actually said, look, I'm ready to come off medication. He helped me kind of like wean off it. Mm-hmm. Then I went back one day and he just said, look, Dan, we're finished. I'm not going to take you any further. You've got everything that you need. And I was shocked because I thought I had 4 weeks left. Is
that quite daunting? Because
I didn't leave the room.
Yeah. I'm not leaving.
No, literally, I was like, I've got 20 minutes left, fella. I paid for it, It was funny. But it was freeing in a sense. I remember I stepped onto the pavement after that therapy appointment, and I just smiled. I looked around, I was like, well done, Dan. I was like, you can see it in my face now when I'm speaking. I get a bit emotional about it, man, because, it was a profound and just such a freeing moment. And I knew then, like, I'd tackled the hardest thing I could have ever faced in my whole entire life. Watch the rest.
Yeah, if you could beat that.
Watch the rest. And so I knew now, I was like, I've got the minerals now. So it was a powerful, powerful moment. And then I had this period of 3 to 4 months without any dreams, without any goals, without needing anything from myself, without needing anything from the world. And that was so freeing. I'd stop wearing nice clothes out on streets unless I was going to a restaurant or whatever. Like, I was just completely comfortable with who I was, and I'd stripped all the ego away and all those like little things. I was just comfortable as Dan. That was amazing, because I'd always had a big dream, and I'd always had this big drive and ambition and this restlessness to want to achieve, and I didn't have it, which was also a little bit scary, because that had provided me so much in the past. But then, like, what started to creep in were these new dreams. Dan, write a book. And so I started writing a book. I wrote 14,500 words on a book that I definitely need to finish. And then I was like, I asked myself a question of, if my salary was like 20 grand for the rest of my life, being the ambitious, talented, and I'm not joking, but if I was, the ambitious, clever lad that I knew I was, and I knew what I had in me, I was like, if I didn't go above 20 grand. Like, what would I do every single day? And I asked myself the question. It was like, work with the kids, like, be of service to the kids, because I knew what I'd missed out on. And my biggest learning through the therapy was like, I'd never seen or heard a conversation, not through primary, secondary, college, uni, or corporate, delivered by a young lad who told me his story, who told me about the impact of suicide and how I'm 65 times more likely to attempt to take my own life because I'd lost PAPS, or whatever these complexities around this conversation, delivered in a way that I could connect with. Not that it was an issue, but at the time, all I'd experienced was older women who were delivering stuff around well-being.
Yeah.
And I wanted a story. I wanted to feel not like a little alien, in a sense. And so then I was like, that's it. I'm going to be the voice I wish I had when I was young. And so dreams started to come back in, but they were no longer rooted in how I could kind of build something to look after everybody else. It was like, what do I actually want to do? Like, what am I here for? And in answering that question around the 20K and being completely content with that, and being like, that was like the fire moment. I was like, that's it. And so I started writing the book, and then I was like, well, how am I going to sell a book? I was like, well, the book's going to take me about 2 years. I was like, if I become a public speaker for 2 years, I'll build an audience, and then I can sell the book. And then I loved speaking so much, and things just went so well from the start.
So what was the first step like? Where did you go to first?
I came up with a name. I don't think you probably talk about it. Potentially, I've done another other podcasts around it, but like, there isn't like a way to start a business. You just start, like, wherever you want to start. Whether you want to build a business plan first, I didn't write a business plan. I started with a name. The name felt really important to me, and I sat on it for like 6 months. And then I came up with a name, and I was like, all right, cool, wonderful. And I was like, well, what would my products be? What would my talk be? And I was like, I know I want to deliver X, Y, Z to students or whatever it is. So started to build a website kind of myself, put those steps in place. And then basically I was working at the time, and I was doing some stuff in schools. I'd sent out some letters, basically. So I had like 100 luxury envelopes, and they had my business name on the front in silver foil. And I wrote handwritten letters to 100 schools, and then I sealed it with wax stamp. And in the wax stamp, it had DG, which was Damaged Goods, the business. Because I was like, listen, I used to send 300 emails a week in corporate, and my response, I get like 1 or 2 back.
It's so minor, isn't it? Like, you just get a percent.
Yeah, exactly. But I was like, if I send a Hogwarts letter, I was like, everyone's going to, I know it's at least getting read. So I sent it out to the schools, and I had an amazing response. Like 25, 30 of the schools came back. Launched on socials, started putting content on social media, first of all, before setting up and launching the business. So I could gauge if the message is that, because this was the first time I was talking about it, and I'd gone 13 years without chatting about some of this stuff, and now I'm putting it into the universe, and people are seeing it. Oh, it was scary. But I had the process of then getting comfortable as a speaker in front of a camera. My first video on my Damaged Goods page was a 3-minute video, talking a bit about what I was going to do in my story. It took me 3 weekends, 6 days to get comfortable with how I looked on camera. I was recording like the full day. It's not there. It took me 3 weekends, like 6 full days to get a 3-minute video. And I was like, right, I can post that. So I posted it. I started putting content, little kind of carousels with words and stuff on, like quotes and stuff, or stuff, and people were loving it. And I was getting messages from people saying, like, this has helped me so much, can I speak to you more? And I was like, right, I know my messaging's good, and I know that my delivery's good, and this feels right, and I'm picking up momentum, getting some interest from schools, whatever it is. And then people were seeing it on social media, and then my old work, because I'd left that recruitment job, they reached out and said, look, it's Mental Health Awareness Week coming up. Can you do a talk for us? And I'm like, my first public speaking talk. Yeah. Because I'd not done any stuff in education, and I'd done some video stuff for some schools, but that was my first corporate talk. And I was like, it's going to be back in front of everyone who was around me when I was going to therapy, who didn't know, and a lot of them still wouldn't have known, and still didn't know at the time when I delivered the talk. And so I was like, fuck it, let's do it.
Just double the
but even then, and then started to put those steps in place, and so then that was my first corporate talk, went amazingly well. Wrote 8,500 words on the Monday for the talk, designed the presentation on the Tuesday, memorized it all on the Wednesday, delivered it on the Thursday. And I became good at speaking through writing first, because I was always a great writer. And I was like, I wasn't too confident. So I was like, I know I can get confident by speaking if I know my script.
Yeah.
So if I know 8,500 words, you know, I can veer off, I can improvise, knowing that I've always got somewhere to come back to. Yeah. And so that was it. And then launched on socials, and then partnered with a company called CPOMS, who were like the UK's leading safeguarding software company. They reached out to me. They saw the real, some of the stuff that I did when I launched the business, like properly launched it. And they were like, look, we want you to train some teachers next month. There's going to be like 1,000 teachers on this call. Bearing in mind, I'm 24, I've just started. I've never worked in education. I've not been a teacher, but my mum's been a teacher. And again, I was like, what can I give to these teachers who are working with kids every day? So what do I know about teaching? I've seen my mum, you know, I know the impact she's had on kids who have hunted her down 25 years after to tell her how much of an impact she's made on her life. You know, I've seen the letters, I've seen the cards, and I know how much she cares. And so I understand the world of a teacher at home for them as well. I know what they bring home. But I also know the journey through school for a kid who's been through trauma, and in hindsight needed some things from school that he didn't get. And I can give them that. And I can connect a why reason to the practical stuff that they probably hear all the time. You know, and I went down that route, and I designed this training, which basically was the journey through education for a kid who's been through trauma. And I told them my story, but I left out really important points. And so I asked them, look, would you raise this as a concern? And they're like, no, there's no issue. That was the feedback. And I'm like, brilliant, because look what happens when we leave out all the jigsaw pieces from a child's journey. And the jigsaw pieces that got left out were because there wasn't an internal system, there wasn't communication between departments. So how could they know? Because different parts of the school had different jigsaw pieces.
Different
exactly.
It, weren't they?
And so I brought that together, and then I delivered some stuff on effective use of safeguarding training for the company on the last part of the webinar. And straight away, this is the best training we've ever had. Never seen anything like this. This was so impactful. Can you come and speak to our boys? Messages flooded in, emails flooded in. And then that's how kind of the schools started.
That's amazing.
That's the start.
And how many schools have you been to since then?
I don't actually have a figure, but it'll probably be around, it's anywhere between 90 to 100.
That's incredible.
Yeah, which is cool. And obviously now work with amazing organisations, Meta, worked with Jaguar Land Rover, Clifford Chance, Structure Tone, BT, Hayes, you know, really large, incredible organisations, but then a lot of smaller SMEs and stuff as well. And I love the both. I love the big stages, love the smaller ones. And yeah, it's been a dream. Like obviously now I had the TEDx talk. We did a tour across education, delivering 100 free mental health talks in 20 days across 63 schools to impact 25,000 young people. Filmed a documentary. That was amazing. And we're launching our 200 Talks for Change for October. So we're upping the ante to cater for parents, teachers and students on this tour. You know, and now the whole thing for me now is using the story that you've heard for the first, has it been an hour? Maybe, potentially. But for the first part of the podcast, you know, using that and using the power of lived experience to cultivate human connection and human potential. Like it's the storytelling piece which forms a really strong connection with the audience. So my formula in life, in business, in training, when it comes to LivedX, we can come on to it in a moment, but is harnessing the power of lived experience to cultivate human connection and human potential. It's like the storytelling, it's the practical learning, delivered in a way that's market leading. And this is the other thing. There's a lot of people who have stories, or they have, you know, a psychology degree, but where they kind of lack in a sense is the design when it comes to public speaking talks, because a lot of people will view it very logically and very like this, whereas I come from music. And so the way that I design my training is like a piece of music, highs, lows, like fast and slows, like tension and release, playing around with structure. And it's a lot more performative elements in there, and really kind of using storytelling to increase engagement. And that's the one thing that people always say when they see me speak. They'll say, like, I've never seen anything like that. That was a really unique experience, and that's what I want to create on a larger scale now with the training in LivedX.
It's unreal, mate. Yeah, and it's the fact that you can take something that's been obviously such a traumatic experience, but you probably won't even ever fully see the positive that does. You will see the sort of initial ripples, but the ripple effects will continue, right? So like the positive stuff you will have a result of what your work you're doing will be amazing.
So are you talking, so in what sense? So
in terms of the people that it's going to help, so you'll 100%. See the immediate impact that it'll have, but it could have such vast reaching impact, like
Yeah,
in an amazing way.
No, it is, and it's there's been moments for me where, because you kind of lose all of that. People always say like, you must feel this, you must feel, and I feel so grateful to be able to do what I do. But like you said, the hardest thing for me is seeing impacts, because it's like, how do you, I'm looking at ways that I can kind of measure social impacts, but it's never a true reflection of because you can't, those things are intangible, and I think they need to stay intangible, because it's not the need to stay, but they are just, it's like the magic of life. It's like that. It's intangible. It really, really is. And it's such a powerful force and powerful energy. But, I've had moments where people have reached out and gone, Dan, I heard you speak 3 months ago, and tried taking my life 2 weeks before, and I'm now accessing support, and I feel so much better, and I'm back in the gym.
That's kind of what I mean. But there'll be, for every one of them, there could be 100 others who just haven't told you that.
100%.
You know what I mean?
And there's the flip side of, the acts of service. So my whole thing, one of the biggest tools I use to look after myself is the idea of service. And what's amazing around that is, when someone gives to you, you're far more likely to pay it forward, because of the release of oxytocin and all that sort of stuff, like the pay it forward principle. And so I know, even like, I know when I'm of service and the amount of people that I will deliver to, and they'll go, Dan, thank you so much, because I've quit my job and I've started doing what I actually really want to do. And, now I'm making change in my community, and I'm doing it. Like, that happens all the time. A young lad recently, he came down to my talk yesterday in Brighton. Brighton and back in the day yesterday. I'm tired. Yeah. 8 hours on train. But I started mentoring him like 4 years ago. 3-4 years ago. He was from the first schools that I spoke at, but he didn't see me speak. The school just wanted me to work with him. He was struggling with his attendance. He was struggling with getting up into some stuff out of school, some difficult things, wrong people, wrong crowds, wrong behaviours. But he was a brilliant young lad. But he'd been through similar experiences than I had. But when you spoke to him, like, manners were amazing. Like, held himself well. Like, and you can see really pure. Like, just the essence of him was brilliant. But obviously just losing his way a little bit. Mentored him for quite some time through the school, and then it stopped. And we kept in touch here and there, but not often. And he reached out like 18 months ago, and he just was like, Dan, I hate my job. And he said, you've had such a big impact on my life. He's like, I want to do what you're doing. I want to be able to give back. And so I started mentoring again, and for free, obviously. And been working on his public speaking skills and mindset, and got him back into the gym. And now we've just got him his first public speaking talks. And like, now he's been able to create exactly. And that's the byproduct of it. And I want more people to see the role that service has in changing our relationship with our difficult experiences. Because genuinely, I can sit in front of you, and like, the suicide for me is now one of the most beautiful parts of my life, because of everything that's come from it. And that's amazing. And I no longer have this heaviness around it. I can sit there and go, yeah, this happened and this happened and this happened, but look at all this. And I know Paps is working through all of it anyway, so that's an amazing thing for me. And I wish people saw and felt that more.
Yeah, and hopefully they will from this. Do you let yourself dream a bit now? Dream a bit more now?
It's the dreams came quick. When they came back, they flooded in. It wasn't like a small thing.
Come on then, tell me.
Yeah, so exactly that. So it was a really powerful, vision. And so now with LivedX, the whole goal is to basically use the ecosystem of kind of the large corporates to bring stuff to low to no cost for schools. One of the biggest barriers in education is obviously that. And to provide kind of market-leading training, harnessing the power of storytelling, fundamentally in the business, to create the most impactful training, whether it's for corporates or whether it's for schools. So there's 11 speakers in the business now, which is great. They work off kind of like a freelance model, but obviously partner with the organisation, kind of supporting some of those with their own public speaking skills and whatnot. Kind of have some programs in the business, leadership program and a wellbeing program. We have the tours. So my vision with the tour is to have one of the big tours every year. And then we've just secured a partnership with the Wirral Council to deliver a tour across 20 schools. So that's 80 talks. So I'm going to replicate that tour model across different councils, which will be amazing. And then the other thing is supporting organisations on kind of like social value, which is a huge thing for me, because that formula is great. I can support organisations with their CSR, for example. And deliver stuff for free into schools, which can show, they get to be involved with something that is really powerful, that shows the human side to the business, which is the right thing to do, which a lot of organisations, I truly believe, do want to be involved in. And we can take the stress away and go, listen, you don't have to worry about the system. we can invite you down, we can get you involved, we can create whatever it is, and we can give you the formula, and we'll go and impact, and we'll measure it all, and we can create some change with some kids, which is incredible. So for me, it's about using that ecosystem. Just launched, let me stay on LivedX. The long-term vision is to create a digital product, basically, a piece of tech. And I feel a bit, because it's been such a big dream for quite some time, I'm also at a point, I'm going to talk about it anyway, but I've been at a point where I'm like, Dan, I need to stop talking about it, because, it's felt like this thing that's always been there, but I'm hopefully going to be at a point in the next few months where potentially I'll be able to self-fund it. So we'll see, but if not, it's going to be a longer journey of investment and whatnot. But my goal, my long-term vision is to build a piece of tech to revolutionize the education system when it comes to well-being for parents, students, and teachers, but then also some of the skills for young people, some of the soft skills. So that's the long-term vision. But I want to always keep the power of human connection, because my belief is, as we grow towards a more digital age, the need for human connection is going to become ever more important. Totally agree. So that for young kids, for me, is and for anyone basically is super important. And then obviously just 2 months away from launching the drinks business, which is Orb drinks, so nootropic infused beverage, alcohol alternative.
And how did this come about?
Basically, it was an idea. So me and the lads, I've got two other co-founders, Connor and Sean, brilliant lads. And about a year ago, we were sat, we're all into fitness, mental health, obviously myself, really important that I look after my body and my mind, and a regular, just kind of take electrolytes and supplements, and knew about the nootropic space and whatnot, and all of those sorts of things. And we all had our own experience with kind of drinking and then drinking less because of fitness and whatnot. And I would always have to choose between going out and socializing and either missing the gym the next day or feeling shit the next day, or staying in, going to the gym, but then not socializing. Yeah, exactly. And there was always that. And I was like, can we create a product that can give you a bit of a social kick, that's sexy and nice to drink, that feels cool when it's in your hand, that people don't ask questions about if you're drinking it, that thing as well.
That if you're burning knobs, why are you drinking that?
100%. But that also tastes amazing, and that actually could be good for the brain. And we knew obviously about the nootropic space and the functional beverage space, and so we started working on it about a year ago. And then it's been so interesting because you got service-based businesses. I've realised how easy the service is compared to a product.
You can start it tomorrow. Products.
And it's like, supply chain, logistics, which, to be fair, credit to the boys, I don't have to touch that side. I'm on like creative partnerships, and heading up the corporate channel, because the goal with that is to also try and change culture within corporates. Like the idea that 25% of the UK workforce, I think it is, doesn't actually drink, whether for ethnic reasons or just their own personal values. At end of years, there isn't really an option for that. And so we want to kind of, even went fridges in corporates. So if you've got any fridges guys at home listening, you need filling with some nootropic drinks, let me know. So things like that, I think that's the vision with it, and just to try and grow that out. But
how close is that?
2 months away. So July time. Super exciting, man.
Excited. You'll have to,
I should have brought it in.
You
can sample,
And, we'll get it.
Can you edit that in? Some CGI, mate. AI will do it for you.
Yeah, mate. So that's a whole new journey to go after. And I mean, you're a year into it, but the exciting bit's just
launch.
Right.
Exactly, and that's, I was saying, it's quite polarizing. It's been a polarizing time. I had a really tough start to business this year when I first launched LivedX. Things just didn't go the way they should have done. Lost deals with really large kind of US clients because of some of the difficulty of the market. And it was frustrating because I'd had the business plan for LivedX for 3.5 years. And I'm like, I've been waiting, I'm so excited to get there, and it just didn't go to plan. And so, there's all these amazing things that have been on the periphery for so long that haven't dropped yet. And that's been challenging as an entrepreneur myself, because again, I'm talking about all these things. They're not here yet. They feel like they're close. And they're just and I'm like, then you start to be like, am I just chatting shit? Am I just chatting rubbish? Is this actually? And so that's been a really interesting learning, but I'm enjoying the process of just all that, in a sense.
That's amazing. You've got LivedX for real purpose-driven business,
Mm-mm.
and then Orb is an exciting new opportunity for it.
Yeah, and the market looks really cool with that one. So, yeah, it's an exciting time, but obviously it comes with its challenges. But that's the beauty of it all, isn't it? As you'll know yourself with the journey of entrepreneurship.
That was Daniel Wilsher. What an inspiration. Thanks so much for listening to the show this week, and please do make sure to click the follow button on your podcast app so you never miss an episode. And don't forget to check out Ministry of Work, where you can also sign up for a free trial day. This episode was produced, recorded and edited right here at Ministry of Work, with a special thanks to our studio manager Dan Brown and, of course, to you for listening. I'm Eddie Whittingham, and this has been Greater Manchester's Greatest Minds.